If you've been around modded Minecraft for as long as I have, then this glowstone portal likely gives you a huge wave of nostalgia, or reminds you of the disappointment you once felt if you tried to make it in vanilla. But now, this portal leads to something bigger and better than ever. Welcome to the Aether II, a new dimension that takes you way up into the skies, essentially made to be the opposite of the Nether. Just like the previous version, here you'll find all kinds of magical creatures and interesting structures full of great loot that will help you through this mod's super intriguing progression path. The Aether II is now just an alpha, so while there's a ton of content here, the mod will only grow over time, including some planned features that I'll mention in this video, as well as what I'm sure will be tons of new things, maybe even some driven by the community. Now, while I enter this new world prepared with all kinds of gear, I have some work to do, because vanilla tools and gear aren't super effective here, and instead, this is a new beginning. And in classic Minecraft fashion, that means it's time to punch a tree, or in the Aether, a skyroot tree. Then I can make my crafting table, and make my first tool a skyroot pickaxe. Use that to mine some holystone, and turn that into a holystone pickaxe. This might seem a little familiar, but before I head down into the mines, it's time to break out of that vanilla Minecraft chain a little bit, where I look for a new, very important resource. And I'm still looking for a tree, but this time a very special variant. And these golden leaves are just what I'm looking for. Other than skyroot, there's also a special tree called amber root that has these bits of amber embedded in the logs. I can either break the log to get a piece of golden amber, or if I'm feeling less destructive, I can strip the log to just extract the amber directly. Golden amber is a pretty important resource for some of the future gear that I've planned, so I'll want a good bit of it. And of course, since it comes from a tree, that means it's a renewable resource since I can replant, rinse, and repeat. One more thing I'm going to make before heading down to find some ores is a trowel, which is basically a hoe. I can still use it to till farmland, but more importantly to harvest berries and fruits from around the Aether, which I'll definitely need since I'm starting to get a bit hungry. You can find blueberries, oranges, and windberries, all of which provide a decent enough food source to get you started. There's one more thing we should probably touch on before saying goodbye to the sky, and that's these clouds that are all over the place. Honestly, the clouds are probably one of my favorite parts of the original Aether, and they return in basically the same capacity. Cold air cloud is the most common, and while a little soft, does let you stand on the cloud and wade through it. Green air cloud is basically the opposite. Not only can you not stand on it, but it actually shoots you straight downwards. Purple air cloud also yeets you, but instead of down, it shoots you off in the direction the wind is blowing. Blue air cloud is a bit more fun, acting like a trampoline, except no double bouncing. And gold and storm air cloud are a little more rare, and I think aren't yet implemented because they both act pretty much the same as the normal cold air cloud. And last but not least, I guess isn't actually a cloud at all, but it does still affect your movement, and that's quick soil. While at the high level, this is the same as the original Aether, it's been changed a bit, now not just speeding you up, but only accelerating you in the direction you were originally moving when hitting the sand, which is definitely a little bit weird. It feels almost like ice, but not quite. I'm really hoping we see some cool parkour maps or something built with these blocks, because I already know I could see myself getting addicted to speedrunning some course or something, reliving my Hypixel and Mineplex days. Okay, that's enough time on the surface, and it's getting to be nighttime, so I guess I should head down to the caves where it's a bit safer. There are a couple different ore options, but one ore you'll see a whole lot of is called Ambrosium, which is basically a coal equivalent, not just because it allows you to smelt items in furnaces, but also in crafting recipes where you can make Ambrosium torches, campfires, and some other items that we'll touch on later. There's also holystone quartz ore, which is relatively simple and drops some nether quartz. As you keep progressing through the mines, you'll find some more ores like Zanite, which is basically the Aether's version of iron. But the Aether II has something different up its sleeve, because Zanite ore actually drops fossilized Zanite that isn't extremely useful on its own. And unlike vanilla, it's not quite so simple to just throw them in a furnace. Instead, you'll need a new workstation called the Amber Hourglass, which will need the golden amber from earlier to craft. Then in the hourglass, you fill in the middle slot with more golden amber, kind of like coal, and then put your fossilized Zanite in the top to convert it to a Zanite gem. And those Zanite gems are what you'll need to make your next tier of gear. So I'll go ahead and make some Zanite armor, and more importantly, a Zanite pickaxe. As you continue to head lower and lower into the Aether, at some point you'll see the holy stone start to get a bit darker, and that's where it transitions into undershale. This is kind of similar to how stone changes to deep slate in vanilla. And just like deep slate, we need a tougher pickaxe to break this harder stone. And luckily, my Zanite pickaxe is up to the task. Here I can find a couple new ores like Arkenium, which is somewhere in between iron and diamond, Gravitite, which is basically diamond, and the most rare Corbonite, which is kind of like ancient debris requiring a Gravitite pickaxe to mine. All of these ores drop fossilized or inert versions that have to be processed the same way as we did Zanite. Now there's actually one more ore that you can find that's slightly different than the others, and that's glint ore. This ore you can break to get fossilized glint, which when restored gives you glint gemstone, which in this pack is money. No, literally, it's the currency for the Aether. And in fact, if you open up your inventory and switch over to the guidebook, which we'll talk more about later, you have this nice little pouch where you can store all the glint you acquire along the way. Now with all my new resources, I can go ahead and make a full suite of tools and armor. And the Aether II adds a whole new gear system that allows you to forge and upgrade your gear to make it even better. But before getting into that, I want to check out some of the newly revamped mobs and structures added in the Aether II. And to do that, I'll have to explore through 4 major types of biomes. The high fields, which is basically what I consider to be the default biome, most similar to the original Aether, including the flourishing fields, verdant woods, shrouded forest, and the classic water level, the shimmering basin. But the second major type breaks away from the old and gives a very different but nice set of variety in the magnetic biomes, made up of the magnetic scar, broken up by massive pillars of a new Aether magnetic material called ferrocite, the turquoise forest, the glistening swamp full of giant mushrooms and massive trees, and finally the violet highwoods, kind of like the jungle of the Aether. In a complete change of direction, things will get a bit colder in the third type, the Arctic biomes. Starting with the most difficult frigid Sierra, full of extremely deep snow and ice. The enduring woodland, which shields some of that snow and ice with a tall skyline tree canopy. The frozen lakes, where you'll definitely want to be wary of fragile ice pockets. And the sheer tundra, basically a desolate, frozen, and rocky wasteland. The last major type is a bit special, made up of the much more rare oddballs. Right now, there are only a couple variants in this category, like the contaminated jungle or battleground wastes. But eventually, there will be tons more engaging and special biomes, such as the Expanse, eventually full of floating pirate ships. Now, while some of these biomes can be pretty intimidating with what appears to be tons of void, never to fear, because one feature of the original Aether still remains, because the Aether really is a biome of the skies. Falling into the void of the Aether spits you right out into the sky of the overworld, which means you can fly to safety with an elytra, clutch up with a water bucket, or in the worst case, splat on the ground. But hey, at least you can get those items back, unlike in the end. While traveling through all the different biomes, you may come across a couple of different useful and interesting structures, like these little campsites spread around for some nice temporary shelter during your travels. There are also these watchtowers that are a little bit more rare, but do contain a nice chest up top with a good amount of different loot, including resources and sometimes some tools or weapons. You may also come across this much larger structure called the Outpost. While this doesn't have any loot, it does have this massive campfire in the middle, which when activated basically saves it as a checkpoint that you can return to. Now, if you get wrecked by anything in either the Aether or even the overworld, you'll see a new button on your death screen, allowing you to choose to respawn back at your normal spawn point or back at the outpost. While not implemented yet, the Aether team does have a plan to add an NPC to the structure that allows you to jump between discovered outposts for a small fee, kind of like how the Waystone mod works, so hopefully that fee is in fact small. And last but certainly not least are these ruins, which may seem pretty uninteresting at their surface, but this overgrown rubble actually hides a staircase down to something much more dangerous, the home of the Sentry, which may look a little familiar from the original Aether mod. Down here is a bit of a maze full of all kinds of chests, some including some nice loot, and others being fake chests transforming into a mimic. And these mimics have been completely retextured and are way more gross than the previous version. You also may come across these Sentry spawners that spawn in cubes that fling themselves at you and explode after their fuse goes off. The third guardian of this maze is the Sentry Golem, who tries to smash you with a slightly terrifying weapon named the Hammer of Demolition. But the true danger of this maze is found in this massive 2-story room, and it's home to legitimately one of my favorite bosses of any mod. This guy isn't like your average boss though, because fitting to his name, he slides around moving in only one linear direction at a time. And while these pillars around his platform provide a little bit of protection, he explodes any blocks he touches, so it's best to just keep running around in circles. While his movement can be relatively easily dodged, here's the catch. Swords are completely ineffective against him, and instead pickaxes are the magical weapon of choice. He is basically a giant stone block after all. Once you hit him enough, just like most bosses, our slidey boy gets a little bit angry, turning red and moving much quicker. And then finally, once you take him out, he'll return back to the center and explode with a nice victory noise, and also reveal a chest full of some super powerful loot that I'm not going to spoil for you, but trust me, it's worth it. Unfortunately, in this alpha version, there aren't really any other major structures, but it sounds like the Aether team has a whole bunch of new bosses, dungeons, and structures, some being updates and revamps from the original mod, as well as a whole bunch of brand new ideas, which is pretty exciting. But of course, while you're traveling through the endless terrain searching for different structures, you're also going to come across all kinds of friends, and some foes along the way. Some returning from the original Aether mod, like flying pigs, or figs. Yes, that's really what they're called. Flying cows, zephyrs who won't hesitate to yeet you off the edge, air bunnies who aren't just cute but useful because you can wear them on your head to glide around, the slightly annoying cockatrice, which is basically an angry chicken but does have some really cool new animations, and of course my personal favorite, the air wall, who had a bit of a texture revamp. But the most useful mob of the original Aether is also back, and that's the Moa. In the Aether II, these guys haven't just gotten a bit of a makeover, but also a slight rework in their mechanics. Just like before, there are a whole bunch of different MOA variants. But unlike before, if you want to tame your own, you'll have to find a MOA nest, which in the middle will contain a MOA egg. Unfortunately, the only way to get a tamed MOA is to steal one for yourself. So just grab the egg and run as fast as you can, because those MOA parents definitely won't be happy that their hard work is getting yoinked. While not quite as nice as its original nest, if you place the MOA egg on a block of woven skyward sticks and wait just a little bit, it'll eventually turn into a cute little baby MOA. Now be careful because these guys will run away, so make sure they're in a nice enclosed area, and while he grows up, keep an eye out for when he gets hungry, shown with these purple particles, so that you can feed it some MOA feed, and eventually it'll turn into your very own adult MOA. Now to take advantages of the perks of my new pet, I can make a MOA saddle to run super quick, glide around, and basically fly using its air jumping ability shown by the number of feathers at the top of the screen. If you open your inventory while riding, you'll see a couple extra slots where you can give your MOA a saddlebag to have some mobile storage, and a slot for a MOA feed to help always keep your MOA full. On top of the reworked friends, the Aether II also adds a whole bunch of brand new mobs. I won't cover all of them so I don't spoil the fun of running into these guys, but I will cover a couple of my favorites, like the Kirid, basically a flying sheep, the Burukai, who you definitely don't want to make angry, this massive boy called the Tioger, who's kind of like a sniffer who will dig around in the dirt and give you some fun ingredients used for crafting some even more fun and useful items. You'll also definitely want to keep an eye where you're walking so you don't step on a carrion sprout that's basically a wild bear trap. As you go deeper into the caves, friend is unfortunately not the word I would use to describe the mobs you'll find, because these guys get pretty dangerous pretty quickly. Like the Arkenian Talaton, who slams you into the ground, the Gravitite Talaton, which pulls crystals from the ground and flings them at you extremely quickly. The Skephid doesn't do any damage, but does fling a web at you that gives you an effect similar to being stuck in a cobweb. And definitely be on the lookout for the Tempest, who flings orbs at you that don't just explode, but electrocute you in an area around the explosion. Now, I just covered a whole bunch of mobs, and there are a ton more that I didn't talk about, as well as I'm sure a bunch more that are going to be added in the future. But luckily, the Aether II adds something new that makes it much easier to keep track of all these new friends, and that's called the Guidebook, which you can access by clicking the button below your inventory. In the Guidebook, you'll see a slightly different version of your UI, still with the same 2x2 crafting table, but now a more expanded equipment section for your armor and some other items we'll cover in a bit. But at the top of the screen, if you click the yellow ribbon, you'll switch over to the Discovery chapter, which acts kind of like a log of all the knowledge that you've discovered, starting with the bestiary, showing all the mobs you've encountered on your adventures, kind of like a Pokedex. For any of these mobs that you have encountered, you can click on their entry to see all kinds of information, like their stats, weaknesses, and even their taming items or their drop table, which is honestly extremely useful. I really hope that other mods add something like this, or find a way to make their mobs show up in this discovery page. There also is another tab for all the possible Aether effects that you can have, which there are a whole lot of, and I've only scratched the surface of. Each entry will not only explain what the effect does, but in some cases even tell you which items you can use to cause or counteract the effect, like bandages, which apparently help reduce stun buildup. And I'm sure this book will continue to grow as the mod continues to update, serving as a great source of knowledge whenever you come across something that you don't know what it is or what it does. Speaking of things you might not know what they do, there are a couple workstations that we haven't covered yet. First is a simple one, the Artisan's Bench, which is kind of like a stonecutter or chisel for all the different Aether blocks. There are a ton of Aether building blocks with a huge variety of textures that gives you a ton of flexibility for all your building needs. Next up is the Altar, which is used to essentially infuse items using Ambrosium. And actually for Gravitite and Arkenium, this is the workstation we'll use to make their associated plates, used to make the tools and armor, unlike the Amber Hourglass that the rest of the materials use. Right now, the Altar doesn't have a whole lot of recipes outside the Arkenium and Gravitite pellets, but it does allow you to make enchanted versions of the different Aether foods, with 1 to 2 pieces of Ambrosium, making them give much more saturation. You can also use the Altar to repair the durability of your Aether tools and armor, using more Ambrosium for the higher tier items. The Arkenium Forge is the next workstation, and this one is pretty exciting. The Forge allows you to upgrade and augment your Aether equipment. So when I put a tool like this pickaxe in, I'll see a couple different options that I can take to upgrade my tool, using different amounts of Arkenium plates and Corbinite crystals depending on the tier of the upgrade that I want to pick. The higher the tier, the more durability that I get. But most importantly, at the max tier reinforcement, I also add a charm slot to the pickaxe, which you can see at the top left of the GUI. Right now, there's only one charm for tools, but when I place a tier 1 charm into the GUI and forge the tool, I now not only increase the durability, but the mining speed as well. You currently can't craft these charms, and there is a very small amount of them for each of the 3 categories: tools, armors, and weapons. But for now, you can find them while exploring the Aether and looting different chests. And of course, I'm sure there'll be way more charms and higher tiers added in future updates. But the forge isn't actually the only thing that makes the Aether gear special, because pretty much every piece of gear comes with a different special ability. When you hover over Aether gear, you'll see its ability and how to activate it if it isn't passive. These abilities are tied to the material that the gear is made from. So for example, the Holy Stone tools shed Ambrosium, which means while using them, you may notice extra Ambrosium that drops, which is pretty useful, especially on a pickaxe when mining. But my personal favorite is the Gravitite tools, where you can shift right click on a block and pick it up and move it wherever you want. And if you're feeling a little more destructive, while holding a block, you can left click to send it absolutely flying. The armor has a slightly different set of abilities, like Zanite armor, which gives you a speed boost, or the Gravitite gear, which gives you the ability to double jump, allowing you to move around the Aether terrain much easier. Now, there are a couple extra items that I think deserve a little bit of attention. First is a couple different gliders, each made with their associated air cloud. The gliders do exactly what you think they do, allowing you to glide around, which is super helpful with all these floating islands. Depending on the air cloud you use, each glider has a different ability, but be careful as you're using them because they do have a durability that honestly is pretty small. The next item is the Bridal Lasso, which works kind of similar to a vanilla lead, except now with a bit of range, and also allows you to wrangle multiple animals at the same time, or even lasso 2 animals to each other. And the last item is the Dart Shooter, which has 4 different types of ammo: Amber, Ambrosium, Toxin, and Venom, each of which have their own effect that is inflicted on whatever they hit. To load the shooter, you can just craft the gun with the darts, and then you can hold right click to shoot the darts out. The darts themselves don't actually do any damage though, they only apply the effect of the associated dart. And there we have it, most of the main features I've at least discovered so far in the Aether II. But of course, like I mentioned at the beginning, while I'm excited for this mod to be back, I'm more excited for all of the new stuff that is already a work in progress and hopefully playable soon. In fact, the Aether team has already put out a massive planned feature list, including some super intriguing things, like an infected guardian tree dungeon, a foundry dungeon, the Bandit King's fortress dungeon, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm really hoping that there is a pack coming at some point this year that really leans into the Aether and uses it as the key point of progression. But I do think we'll have to see the mod get a little closer to a finished or stable point before that happens. Regardless, if you guys would be interested in a 100 days video in the Aether, definitely leave a comment and I'll consider it. And of course, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because I have a couple super exciting videos coming soon, including another mod labs featuring a new unreleased mod, and another 100 days video featuring a pack being released in the next couple of weeks. I hope you guys have as much fun in the Aether 2 as I've had so far, and I have to say, for a very first release of an alpha mod, I am so impressed with the level of polish, and it truly lived up to the intense nostalgia from the very first New Dimension mod that I played all the way back in 2011.